welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today to participate in this virtual cross-border workshop on a timely topic, the impact of digital transformation on finance, comparative analysis of Egypt, France, and Morocco. This cross-border workshop is the first one of a series of 3. 2 other workshops on digital transformation will take place throughout the year, one in Paris and one in Morocco. This series of 3 cross-border workshops is jointly organized by ESLSCA Paris, ESLSCA Rabat, and ESLSCA Egypt. For this first workshop, ESLSCA University Egypt is the main organizer. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Hélène Syed. I'm the Executive Director of the ESLSCA Research Center of Excellence at ESLSCA University Egypt. I'm really pleased to be the chair for this workshop. My role will be to manage time effectively and to facilitate our panel discussion. Before we start, a few housekeeping rules. They appear here. So first, note that all participants are muted by default to avoid interrupting our speakers during their presentations. If you are facing a technical issue with the webinar, please use the chat function that appears on the bottom right corner of your screen. This session will be recorded and posted on the ESLSCA's website. Please feel free to start asking your questions to our speakers or providing us with your comments as of right now and throughout the session using the chat function. I will be collecting your questions. Let me share the agenda of today. First, there will be 4 presentations of about 10 to 12 minutes each. Then we will have a 30-minute Q&A session. I will now quickly introduce our speakers. First, Eslam Darwish. He is the CEO and founder of Just Innovate, specialized in driving digital transformation, innovation, and customer experience in finance services sector. He is also a partner of FinTech at Global Ventures. He was previously Global Head of New Product Development and Innovation at MasterCard. Eslam has more than 20-year experience in corporate innovation and product development, digital transformation, and startup incubation across North America, Europe, Africa, and Middle East. He is based in Egypt. Rasha Negm is Assistant Sub-Governor of FinTech and Innovation for the Central Bank of Egypt, leading on Egypt's FinTech strategy implementation and innovation ecosystem enablement. She previously assumed the role of Head of Mobile Payment. Rasha has more than 19-year experience of working in banks, multinationals, and leading mobile operator in Egypt. She will also represent Egypt. Welcome, Rasha. Franklin Meimoun is Senior Managing Director at Union Bancaire Privée, a Swiss-based private bank where he has spent the last 10 years heading its global treasury and LAM department. He is now in the process of creating a new consulting and advisory company in his area of expertise in order to offer balance sheet management services to private banks, insurances, and corporate treasuries in several jurisdictions, including Switzerland, the EU, and the UK. Wael Aminou is currently the chairman of Al Maali Group. He oversees and leads advisory assignments in more than 14 countries, mostly in the MENA region. He is specialized on FinTech and on integrating sustainability into the business model of financial institutions. On the academic side, he lectured in different institutions, including the British, the French, the Turkish, and the Moroccan ones, and extensively published in international journals. He represents Morocco. This workshop brings us together today to discuss current and future FinTech trends through a comparative lens between Egypt, France, and Morocco. We will especially focus our attention on the relationships between banks, FinTech startups and GAFA, and on the general steps taken from a regulatory perspective to foster FinTech ecosystem in each country. I would love to hear first from Eslam, who will have and give us a global perspective on FinTech trends. Eslam, please, the floor is yours for about 12 minutes. I will stop now sharing the screen so that you can share yours.
Can you see my slide already?
Yes, perfect.
Very good. Okay, well, thank you, Hélène, for the kind introduction, and it's a pleasure to be with our panelists today, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak at ESLSCA University. And I'm humbled to be in the company of Dr. Nadia Al-Arif, who is more than a mentor to me, but she's also even more than family. So it's a real pleasure to be here. So today I'll be talking about a topic that is near and dear to my heart, which is financial inclusion. It's quite a unique global opportunity, and one of the things that I love about it is it's a space where the impact in our societies meets massive commercial opportunity. What I'll be doing today is I'll start with a global overview of how financial inclusion looks like from an opportunity perspective, go into a regional level in MENA, and then do a short deep dive in Egypt. And we have Rasha Negm with us here, who can speak about Egypt much better than I can. So I'm sure she will have much more to add on the topic. So we will just start with a quick view in terms of the global landscape. FinTech, as I'm sure all of you know, has been growing exponentially around the globe, driven by North America and Europe. But the Middle East, Africa has seen exponential growth, and we you know, from an investment perspective, we definitely see that the consumers are going to be coming from emerging markets, and specifically. So we will be drivers of growth of FinTech moving forward. We've seen over time that FinTech has actually started to truly eat away from the incumbent players in financial services, whether it's payment firms like the MasterCard of the Visas of this world, or traditional banks. But that's kind of a one lens perspective. The other thing to consider is that FinTechs have also helped grow the overall pie in terms of business opportunities for all the players involved in the ecosystem. The growth has been huge in terms of investments in FinTech. We've got $50+ billion that get invested in FinTech every year. And the unfortunate situation is when it comes to looking at investments in our part of the world, it's really a drop in the ocean with $74 million, right? So we have quite a big catch-up to do there. I mean, if we were to get our fair share of global investments, you probably need to multiply this number by 10 or even more. Again, in terms of, if you look at how digital transactions have been evolving in our part of the world, despite the high double-digit growth we're seeing, we're still only, again, at a fraction of overall global growth. As you can see here, there is 4.4 trillion global digital transactions versus only $72 billion in our region. Now, again, there is a gap, but there's a huge opportunity, and we believe that the region is at a huge inflection point. We're seeing some very positive signs, especially recently with the birth of the first unicorn in Egypt, Fawry, that's now valued over $2 billion. So that's really a positive sign. And on the back of that, we're seeing massive flow of investments back into Egypt. Just looking again with a little bit of a more focus around the region and what is driving the growth. We're definitely seeing that despite the COVID-19 situation, that there is a huge increase in appetite to continue to invest in FinTech, driven by investor appetite, driven by consumer adoption, but also driven by the regulator and government support towards this digital transformation for financial services. We continue to see that especially in how the number of early stage startups that have been that are coming literally every day across our regional markets, And the lead markets from that perspective, UAE remains to tops that list, followed by Egypt and then Saudi. We've seen close to $142 million that have been invested in 2020 alone in the region, and that number continues to grow. And just to give you a perspective, 2019 we've seen only 74 million invested. 2020 we've seen 142, and in Q1 of 2021 we've already seen $45 million being invested. So the growth trajectory is really super positive from an investment point of view. Now, what's all the fuss about, right? Why is everybody rallying behind the opportunity? And really, as they say, numbers never lie. We still got 1.6 billion people out there that are financially excluded. We've got 200+ million businesses that don't have access to appropriate or relevant financial services, which ultimately translates into a global credit gap of more than $2.1 trillion. That is really a massive opportunity that allows businesses or justifies why businesses are rallying and investors are rallying behind the opportunity. The great thing about financial inclusion, as I mentioned, is it is not just a business opportunity, but it has some serious economic impacts. So we envisage that if we were to bridge the gap from a financial inclusion point of view, we could add to global economy another $3.7 trillion, which is a plus 6% over the normal projected or forecasted global growth. The opportunity is massive, and it's big enough for incumbents and for fintechs. In terms of just pure banking services alone, we have an annual $200 billion of revenue that is waiting for somebody just to knock the door and pick it up across different regions and across different kinds of financial services, primarily on the credit and lending vertical. If I'm going too fast, please do slow me. One of the great things about what FinTech is bringing to the table, not only for themselves, but also for the incumbent banks and financial institutions through partnerships, is that they are creating new business models. They are driving revenues to new heights. They're helping lower the cost of customer acquisitions. And finally, they're delivering unique and exceptional customer experiences that help bring new customer segments and drive adoption for financial services around the globe. Now, good news for us here in the region and everybody interested in FinTech is, as I mentioned, we in this region we have the lion's share of the global financial inclusion gap. There is close to 500 million people that are financially excluded in our parts of the world, and by that I'm including Middle East, Africa, from that perspective. But another fascinating statistic for me that I came across recently is that that 75% of the global financial inclusion gap sits within 25 markets. So if you're considering to get into FinTech and you're considering to scale to have a geographic expansion roadmap, you really need to consider definitely Middle East, Africa as a starting point. But as you expand, look at some specifics between Latin America and Southeast Asia from that perspective. Now, so that's kind of a quick global view. Diving into the MENA region. Now, as I always like to say, there is never a dull moment in MENA, right? So we always have very different. We have a variety of perspectives when it comes to financial inclusion. We have markets that like Egypt and Morocco, for that matter, that have financial services penetration, depending on the kind of service you're looking at, that range between 5 to 20% penetration only. And we have in the region markets like the UAE that has financial service penetration that crosses to 70%, and everything in between. So we have quite a big, diverse landscape in the region. Yet there is still 200 million adults out there that don't have access. So within that context, I'll go into the Egyptian market. And again, Egypt has witnessed an incredible growth in terms of number of fintechs that are operating in the market, but also in terms of consumer adoption. And for sure, the COVID-19 situation and the government support has doubled down on making this opportunity scale significantly. Egypt specifically has 42 million others that are not financially included. There is a close to $1 billion+ lending gap in the market. But the market dynamics itself is what makes it a huge opportunity. Again, like I told, Fowry is a pure local play that's now worth $2 billion. So, and we feel that there is at least room for another 10 unicorns to be born within the Egyptian market scope. It's a huge population. It's a very young population. It's a hugely connected population with almost 100% penetration when it comes to mobile phones. 40 million of them are smartphones. So again, we have the right technology infrastructure or platform to be able to scale financial services. Yet the financial services infrastructure remains underdeveloped. And as I mentioned, we're looking at the bank account penetration of 18%. A market like Egypt, this is an old number, and thanks to the efforts of CBE recently, that number has increased. It used to be 180,000. I don't know, Rasha will have probably the most updated numbers, but I know that there is at least a couple of 100,000 that have been added over the last 12 months, thanks to the central bank initiatives. We still have a huge room to grow in terms of penetration of plastic, penetration of e-commerce, penetration of microfinance and nanofinance solutions here in Egypt. So who are these Egyptians? I think it's worth just keeping that in the back of our head as to understand who we are dealing with. Again, we are a young population. We are looking at an average age of audiences when it comes to the financially excluded between 21 to 45. That represents 70% of the pie. There is close to a 50-50 split in terms of gender. A big chunk of them have primary education or less, and a lot of them are employed, that's no surprise, within the informal sector. And one of the interesting things to note about Egypt is the declared GDP of the country is close to $300+ billion. If we were to add on top of that the informal sector, we will probably be adding another 50% easily. So you can imagine the added value of bringing on these kind of people onto the financial services ecosystem and what that can do to our economy. Now, understanding the profiles is important to be able to address these audiences, but it's also important to understand what they want. Now, let me be very clear here for a second, because people do not, I know we live in the financial services world. We love to talk about FinTech. We love to talk about cashless, and we love to talk about financial inclusion. But the bottom line is people actually do not really care. Nobody wakes up in the morning to say, hey, I wish I was financially included, or I wish I was living in a cashless environment. The only thing that really matters to people is that you offer services that are relevant to them, that facilitate their everyday life, right? And this is a kind of a very simple map to answer the question, what these people are looking for. And I mapped it from a financial or a money flow point of view. On one side, on the cash in, they're looking to try to receive money from insurance, from wages, from government subsidies, savings, and borrowings. And they're looking to spend that money in retail, transport, health, utilities, and education, right? So this is Muhammad living in Tanta this will be a relevant thing to his life. This is his life cycle. And the role of fintechs and the role of financial institutions is to enable and facilitate this cycle through relevant technologies. And it's only then will you really resonate with these customers, and will they see added value of what financial services or fintech can do for them, so we can drive customer adoption. So what does that mean in terms of actions? We feel that financial institutions and fintechs need to embrace design thinking, and that means basically This industry has been built for so many years on the back of making people want things. So you have an architecture in place. I want to push it on the people. And banking has been around for 150 plus years, depending on where you are in the world. Yet the financial inclusion remains gap. So clearly trying to do the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is not the way forward. Right? So you have to apply an outside-in approach in terms of design thinking. What do customers want and how I can build relevant solutions for them? And that's why we think always in a 4D model. First, define the customer needs. The second D is design the right relevant financial products. The third is develop the technical capabilities to support them. And finally, to deliver the relevant go-to-market execution, which translates into financial inclusion. Right? Typically, what you would see in the traditional financial services industry is you start with the developer, right? You build it and hope that they will come, and that's clearly not the way of the future. So I'm about to share a fairly complicated slide, but I will try to simplify the process. So as I said, we have talked about the cycle of those individuals, cash in, cash out. So the idea is to really define this context in which you're going to innovate as a starting point, then design which product you're going to deliver to them, whether you're going to offer them a payment solution, a lending solution, you want to give them insurance, you want to support their SME business through working capital loans, wealth, help them invest or help them bank through deposits or whatever banking services you want. Now, the third step, as we said, is develop. And here I'll pause for a second to highlight sort of one of the key things about today's topic. I feel this is definitely something relevant in Egypt, and I hope others will feel that it's relevant in their markets as well. We've always had friction between the fintechs and incumbent banks. And while there's always an ongoing debate, are fintechs competing or are they partnering with incumbent banks? And I think it's fair to say that around the globe now, there is a conclusion that the future can only work for this industry if both of these two partner together, right? So the conclusion is banking is always going to be around, right? But banks in the current form, not necessarily. What we will see in the industry is that the roles of the players or the stakeholders in the value chain is just going to shift, because banks, while they are currently customer facing, the future is about them really taking a more of a back office role in terms of providing the technology infrastructure and the core banking systems to service fintechs, who will play the role of the front end with the right customer experience to acquire those customers, and thereby reinventing the entire business model in a way that adds value to all stakeholders in the value chain. Now, we're seeing this come to life around the world, and most recently, the world's most valuable fintech today is called Stripe, which is valued at close to $100 billion. Now, one of the fascinating things that Stripe has done is that it's a payment infrastructure business, and recently launched a product called Stripe Treasury. Stripe Treasury today offers services that are basically banking services. You are now able to engage with Stripe and set up your own bank account. You're able to have deposit services. But who is at the back end of Stripe today? We have JP Morgan, we have Citibank, and we have Barclays, right? So what in fact has happened is these huge global players have accepted the new reality. They have agreed to become the back end of a fintech called Stripe, to offer their services through Stripe, and that's what Stripe will do for them is help them penetrate new global segments that these banks never really had access to before. Now, so if the industry organizes itself in terms of the incumbent banks helping provide the infrastructure, the licensing, the AML and risk management, and all these services, opening bank accounts, etc., to to fintechs, okay, and allow secure data sharing between these multiple platforms, the scalability or addressing the idea or delivering on the financial inclusion should really happen at a much higher acceleration. So this approach is what we call banking as a service, for banking as a platform. And I definitely feel that is something relevant for us in emerging markets. Now, obviously, I'm speaking in the presence of our regulator, and it's something I'm making a call out here for support for the banking as a service direction to support the ecosystem. So that's basically what I had to say. I hope I'm on time, and yeah, happy to hand over back to you.
Thank you very much, Eslam, for that. Yes, you were almost on time. Thank you very much. Actually, there is lots of information. I was really interested in many of them, but you know, the profiling of the Egyptians who are outside the financial system. Do you have any info regarding the mapping also? Do they belong to the remote areas mostly, or not? Do you have info regarding this mapping?
I don't have the specifics here on the slide, but absolutely the majority will definitely be, you know, as we know, I mean, Egypt is consisting of 26 governorates. The concentration of financial services exists in only 2 of them. So yeah, so the majority of the gap sits in rural areas. Yeah,
thank you very much, Eslam. So Rasha, please jump in. If you have some slides, share us this piece of thought, and the floor is yours for 12 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Hélène, and Eslam, I can hear you, and good evening and warm good evening to all, especially Dr. Nadia. I echo Eslam. I'm humbled and delighted to be presenting in front of you today. Let me try to share the screen and tell me if you can see it.
Yes.
Yes. So great. So let's start with the FinTech and innovation, which is my area, and for the Central Bank of Egypt inside the business technology sector. So basically, I'll be talking very quickly. I know that Eslam has shown a lot of statistics, and if there isn't a description, depending on, we're taking the official data that's published until the next. So we're still looking at the very big population of more than 100 million. Yes, where majority are youth, and our financial literacy, not the literacy, is like 27% of the adult population. Islam, we're still looking at the financial inclusion that only tapping onto 33%. So hopefully we're going to reach more, as you're seeing with the new FinTech report. We have a gender gap of female versus male of 12%. Our majority of ventures are actually micro and small and medium enterprise. And yes, the mobile penetration is very high. It's almost every citizen in Egypt has a mobile phone, with now reaching more than 50% mobile internet users. So basically, yes, when we want to tap into financial inclusion or tap into the underserved market of the micro and medium small enterprises, we have to look at the digitization, especially that everyone now has a mobile or has access to the internet. And given the importance of the digital transformation given into the financial sector, and based on the National Payment Council that was actually established back in 2017 with the leadership of the president himself running the National Payment Council, with a very big effort happening on the last cash transformation and the promotion of the electronic use of payments, we can find here that FinTech and innovation is an enabler and integral part of the last cash transformation framework that the whole country is working on. Not only this, our national financial inclusion strategy in Egypt, also we're going to find as one of the enabler is actually the digital financial infrastructure and the financial technology. So yes, FinTech is very important when it comes to the national agenda, and this is what came with the decision of endorsing the FinTech in Egypt. So as a central bank, we've issued a FinTech innovation strategy back in 2019. And the beauty about this strategy, and we've done it with one of the international consultants to come up with the best strategy that it suits the Egyptian market, and yet looking into the global market and what's happening. So the beauty of it that we're not only bringing together our national vision in Egypt in terms of endorsing the talent, the digital transformation, endorsing the employment, but rather the CBE vision in terms of financial inclusion and the and the modernization of the financial sector. But we've taken into consideration as well the market aspirations. So we've done a baseline research that it's interviewing and taking the insight of the whole stakeholders in the ecosystem when it comes to FinTech to grasp their needs and insights to come up with a one holistic FinTech and innovation strategy. Basically, and Eslam quite tapped into this, our FinTech strategy, our vision is to become the regional FinTech hub, and we've always has been seen like the gateway between the Arab world and Africa, given our pool of, it's the highest in population in the MENA region. We're having the market, we're having the talent, we have all the parameters to thrive in the FinTech ecosystem, and our aspiration is to become the flagship for financial inclusion, MSME financing, and cross-border activities. Our focus mainly is to address the needs for the underserved and solving national challenges as we go along with the FinTech solutions. And for us to grow the ecosystem, we have to work on different pillars all together to make the ecosystem thrive. And those pillars are mainly 5, which is demand, regulation, funding, governance, and talent. I'll go quickly on what are our objectives and the initiatives around each of those pillars that we're working on, starting from 2019 when we've issued the strategy. So let's step into quickly for them. And the regulation is the most important thing, being a regulator. And here, the central bank is acting as a catalyst for change rather than just merely being the regulator. We want to encourage the adoption of innovative FinTech solutions in the market. We want to balance between the innovation and the risk at the same time. And we want to step in to see how can, like Eslam was saying, how we can actually match make the FinTech solutions along with the incumbents of the financial institutions and banks to promote digital financial services that are more convenient, more accessible, cheaper for the consumers to be included in the financial sector. So we mainly worked on several aspects. Mainly the most important one is the regulatory sandbox. So we've launched the regulatory sandbox back in July 2019. Basically, it's a testing environment where actually startups can actually be able to live test their innovative business model that has regulatory hurdles. So basically, we're relaxing some of the regulatory requirements to enable the innovation, watch it out until they graduate and see how we're going to regulate or license those kind of activities in the market. Just to be honest and to be very quickly, the regulatory sandbox actually exists, and this is a World Bank report. We're among the 57 countries around the world that have regulatory sandbox. To enable the innovation inside the country. Basically, it reduces a lot of time and cost to market for the startups. It helps us maintain the consumer protection and the security and all the regulatory preventive that we want to put in place before the startup goes live into the market. The other thing that we've worked on it very proactively is that with the issuance of the new banking law back in October 2020, we've dedicated a whole chapter in the new banking law that promote the FinTech and the use of digital financial services. From the electronic authentication and the online terms of condition, from open banking regulations, from the sandbox, as I mentioned, and the deal on the digital and cryptocurrencies. Not only this, we're working closely with the Financial Regulatory Authority to issue a new law for alternative finance, whether peer-to-peer lending, ROSCA, the Rotational Saving and Credit Association, or lending-based crowdfunding. All of these upcoming laws are in process to further endorse FinTech solutions in the market. When it comes to the governance pillar, and this is quite important, as Eslam mentioned, we need to make the matchmaking between the FinTechs and other stakeholders, whether investment or financial institution. We need to promote the FinTech collaborations, not only internal, but also external and cross-border. FinTech is actually a cross-border by nature, so we need to endorse this collaboration between all stakeholders and make sure it's effective and it's working. And we've started with an MOU inside Egypt basically we have the Financial Regulatory Authority in Egypt handling the non-banking financial sector, and we have the central bank handling the banking sector. So for us, and we know that FinTech solution can actually tap into a lot of regulators. So we've done an MOU with the NTRA, the National Telecom Regulatory Authority, the FRA, the Financial Regulatory Authority, along with the AML, so we can have a unified strategy and vision when it comes to the FinTech and innovation inside Egypt. Not only this, we're putting the historical building of the central bank in downtown Cairo to be the FinTech and innovation hub, where we're going to create a co-working space for FinTechs, putting talent programs, hackathons, acceleration programs, and even access to the regulators with startup clinics and innovation lab. Not only this, so of course the hub is going to come to 2021 live, but before this we've put it all on virtual. So we have the FinTech Egypt portal since 2019 with a lot of tools that is helping the FinTech for the matchmaking. We have a monthly webinar and a podcast where we can actually do knowledge sharing. We issue monthly newsletters. We're doing FinTech expert interviews. We're on social media for also access and for the startups to know what's happening around the FinTech scene, whether in Egypt or outside. The talent pillar, which I really want to focus on, especially that we're now speaking at with the academic side of it. It's really important to push on the talent side. We have a local talent that we need to grow. We need to endorse the new talent to come up with new FinTech solution inside the Egyptian market. And definitely you need to develop the entrepreneurship and the mindset for the jobs for the future. So here we have a lot of activities doing, but before this activities, first we needed to make it very easy for them by identifying what are the national challenges that we're trying actually to solve for them to come up with the FinTech solutions. So basically we've done a market hearing roundtables with all the stakeholders to come up, and this is published on the FinTech Egypt portal. Please go ahead and check it, with more than 80 problem statements tackling financial literacy, customer engagement, financial inclusion for consumers, for financial inclusion for MSMEs, and so on. So they can actually know what are the challenges that the market needs solutions for. And then we're currently working on a national FinTech literacy strategy. So they actually try to endorse knowledge for the talent side and the demand side, of course, but from the talent side, we're trying to let the university students be more aware of the financial technology, to let the entrepreneurs inside the banks, to let the new future entrepreneurs on how to innovate in the financial sector. So while we're working on the digital financial literacy strategy, we've done a lot of partnerships like the FinTech Academy that issued a 3-month program for the new ideation stage with the FinTechs and startups on how to grow their business. We're doing a great work on Pinology, FinTech for Youth. This is basically a program for the universities in collaboration with banks, and we've done the pilot with a number of universities. Hopefully ESLSCA is going to be running it with us, which is basically endorsing FinTech projects within the curricula for the university student to come up with FinTech solutions as a project based on the national problem statement that we've actually issued inside Egypt. So this is kind of, the pilot was done with 5 private universities with 7 banks endorsing, because basically the winners actually get to have the chance to have an internship with the banks to learn more about the financial sector, especially in the digital area. We've done more than 280 projects along with 600 students, and 9 winning projects actually has taken the internship. So there has been a very successful cohort, and hopefully that we're going to run it and extend it to more universities and more governorates and public and private universities as well. Here's a quick run on the students of the spring winners for having FinTech solution. Those are actually students from either an ASC entrepreneurship student on computer engineering, having solution like Masrufi, Mizanita, those are, and they're supporting a bank's finding solution, mobile wallet solution, or personalized mobile app for budgeting, or just the junior fin from the JUC Innovation Students, or FinMe as an app that facilitates payments and e-commerce. All of this like an example of how the students actually innovate in the FinTech area and won the internship. We also run a lot of innovation challenges and sprints, and in collaboration with international entities, like with France, we've done the French-Egyptian competition, with the UK government and embassy. We've done currently we're running the COVID-19 innovation sprint for specific challenges or problem statements that are currently the financial institutions and banks face from the pandemic, and the RECOF project with which actually in the participation of other countries like Kenya, South Africa, and Nigeria in Africa. We cannot endorse this until we have an exposure of what is FinTech, what is financial technology, and how we can actually endorse the FinTech and innovation. So we've done a lot of conferences and a lot of events that not only in Egypt but in Singapore as the FinTech hub, on showing the activities of the FinTechs and exchanging talents, whether for the Egyptian talents going and innovate or provide their solutions outside Egypt, or even the new solutions like from Singapore and other countries to come up and deploy their solution in Egypt, since we have the market, we have the population, and we have the demand. Finally, on the demand side, and as we said that we're focusing on inclusion and serving the unbanked and underserved, we're trying to increase customer awareness, access to finance, and beat the poverty, and definitely endorse the less cash and digital transformation agendas in Egypt. So basically, there's a number of solutions that we're trying to deploy by matchmaking the FinTech solutions along with the banks, and those are a couple, like we're having marketplaces for MSMEs, we're having supply chain finance, alternative lending based on behavioral scoring, ROSCA model analytics, and a lot of happening. And this is what we can see here is that since our focus on the FinTech when it comes to the government and regulator, we didn't have more than 17 FinTech startups in 2019. And based on the efforts happening and on the ground and the focus on the FinTech, we've came with more than 50 FinTech startups. And according to the GIZ landscape, as you can see, the more than 50 startups, not only on the payment side, but we can see like Eslam mentioned the unicorn of Faurino. We have like other rise FinTechs happening on the personal finance, on the RegTech, on the lending side, and others, that it's very promising, and we're going to see this number of startups growing year over year. Not only this, and a lot of work has happening on the digital financial services, whether awareness on promoting of digital financial services and electronic payments in COVID. Islam mentioned that we're doing a lot of incentives and promotions for the use of electronic payments, like the POS for subsidizing the POSs for the smaller merchants in the rural areas. So we've done a campaign awareness specified for the merchants. The national payment scheme, to have our own national payment scheme for the mass and the public using cards and wallet, which is Visa. So we've done a whole 360 campaign degrees regarding the digital financial awareness. And then leads to funding, and Islam, I was saying, we're happy to say that we couldn't find it in 2018, but since 2019 and 20, Egypt is the second in terms of funding amounts and deals in the MENA region as per the Magnet report. And we couldn't see even FinTech as one of the top industries in Egypt in terms of investments in the startups. Now we can see FinTech is the second industry in Egypt just after the e-commerce. So we're finding that in terms of the average number per deal, it's actually increasing, as well as the number of deals is increasing when it comes to the funding. Just to wrap it up, for us to focus on the FinTech and financial technology or the digital transformation inside the financial sector has an impact on consumer, of course, and we all know it's like affordable financial products, more convenience, more accessibility, cheaper and more safe. But on the economy level, and this is based on the EY economic research and study that they've done, that each one job created in FinTechs create 5.6 jobs, and this is the minimum of it. It was back in 2019. And one EGP invested in FinTech actually resulted 1.6 EGP to the GDP. now with more investments, we can actually have this even number multiplied enterprise. Also, the electronic payments usage, each 10 increase in the electronic payments leads to $1.5 billion to the GDP and creating 200,000 employment jobs. So yes, the impact on the economy is large. It's curbing the inflation. It reduced the cost of the cash handling. It increased job opportunities and, of course, help the financial inclusion or serve the underserved. And by this, I say thank you. I hope I was on time and not boring enough as a regulator. And Hélène, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Rasha, for that. You and Eslam actually provided us with an updated and comprehensive view of the situation in Egypt, so very interesting. Let's see what is the situation in France with Franklin. Franklin, the floor is yours for 10 minutes or 12?
Well, maximum. Hello, everyone. First, I'm really happy to be here today. Maybe you don't know that I'm a former graduated student, of the MBA trading of the ESLSCA in the 2002 class. So this is why I'm extremely happy to be here today. As you can see, you are all expert and all invested in really fintech, etc. And me, I'm a kind of old-style, old-fashioned bank treasurer, encumbered bank treasurer. But I'm here today because I developed a huge interest, obviously, in the fintech industry and all the developments we witnessed in France, in Switzerland, where I'm based, but in general in Europe, because as you know, there is a European landscape around fintech. It's not only the microcosm in France, it's everything is driven especially by the new regulatory framework around the PSD2 Payment Service Directive, which basically supports all open banking initiatives and the development of a huge fintech market. So for example, today, the count of fintech in Europe is over 7,000 entities, and 451 are France-based. Okay. But before jumping into this, I wanted to say something which strikes me when you presented Egypt, and I see the difference between what fintech will bring in Europe and in Egypt. You talked about financial inclusion, when in Europe, in fact, we faced a very mature banking market, okay, and where basically the objective of the fintech industry mainly is basically to improve the quality of service, but also, which is the first reason from the consumer perspective, to reduce the prices, the costs of banking in Europe. So this is really something very interesting, which strikes me in the difference of what fintech can bring in different countries and at the different levels where they stand. Now, this being said, Europe, basically there is 64% consumer adoption in Europe regarding fintech services. And in 2020, the fintech industry raised $5.3 billion, euros. And in 2021, they already raised 2 billion euros, meaning that the pace is increasing. This has been obviously supported by the unfortunate pandemic around the COVID, but this is the situation, and the market basically targets 5.7 billion euros by the end of 2021. So it's a kind of big amount at the moment, and amongst the 7,000 players in Europe, obviously the most famous we have there. So we have Revolut, we have N26, Monzo, which are neobanks. So you will see also in this the level playing field of the fintech industry in Europe, you also have different type of players. So Eslam describes some of them, and it's very, very specifically categorized in Europe. And so you have the neobanks, then you have the new fintech entities, you know, which are issued from, arise from the PSD2 directive. So what is it about? For example, if I give you names like Banking, Budget, or Linkso, these actors are what we call aggregators. So basically, aggregators, they, for example, you have many different accounts in different banks in Europe, and then you want to aggregate everything. And so you have this fintech, which allows you to consolidate everything on an app. And basically, this is called under the PSD2 directive, AISP, aggregator aggregator service provider, aggregator information service provider, AISP. And then you have the PISP, the payment initiation service provider. So there you're talking about, you know, even the GAFA, for example, they are PISP. And then you have what we call the TPPs, the third-party providers. And there we are talking about the fintech entities which provides new solutions. So for example, for deposits, for lending, crowd lending, etc. Could be also the insurtech, the insurance is there also around, obviously, very close. So you see that they created really clear definitions of different actors. And you have the ASPSP, which are basically the former incumbent bank who provide basically the old school, old style infrastructure in Europe. So you see that there is more than 7,000 players, around 5 to 6 billion euros raised every year in Europe, and basically a regulatory landscape which supports basically the creation and the consolidation, the development of this market. And it's also interesting to say that you can be many of them. So basically you can have AISP license aggregator, or you can have a PISP license, so a payment initiator. So if you have both of them, this means that, for example, you could be in a position to consolidate banking accounts of your clients, of your customers, but also allow them on your application to initiate payments on their own accounts. So basically, they are able to pilot everything in one single place. Imagine now if you go further to this and then you aggregate TPP services, then you can, with artificial intelligence on top of this, you know, allow them to facilitate and to take the right decision. For example, you can have someone who is short of cash at end of months, and then you have this application proposing him this type of solution. So you see that there is a clear landscape, regulatory landscape, which support it. And now what we see is as the market starts to be mature in Europe around the proposition of these services, because the APIs, so meaning basically the connectors, which allows the fintech startups, you know, to get the client data out of the incumbent banks. Now they are very mature. Now we see that many players in Europe start to look at North America. North America is a different story. I won't jump into it, but basically they are not really ready for fintech and for this type of what we call open banking initiatives. So at the moment, so everything is going in the right direction in Europe, but you have to bear in mind that it's kind of what I would call a kind of Amazon situation of the early 2000 years, meaning that all the players like Revolut, Monzo, Banking, Budget, etc., the most famous, they are loss-making. Okay, client acquisition is extremely costly in Europe. So, for example, the average, so it's basically a bracket. It's between 10 and 60 euros per annum per client. The acquisition cost, extremely expensive. So all these big players, they are not mature enough at the moment to generate profit. So they are still in a situation where they burn a a lot of cash. So they still need all this, money. I described the 5 billion raised in order to continue in the direction which will normally bring them to the level of being profit-making entities. Now, there is also something which is of importance to say, is the relation with incumbent banks. It has been extremely difficult at the beginning in order to create all these APIs. Because, incumbent banks in Europe, they have their kind of old core banking system. The data are not very clean, so very complicated to create, a database very clean in order to provide the third-party provider, the AISPs, the aggregators, the payment initiators, with a clean data on their APIs. It has been a huge work. I have to say that many banks didn't play very well the game at the beginning because they knew that they were very late. So this has put, some of the fintech players under kind of heavy pressure because they were basically starting to offer services to their clients. And at the same time, they had huge issues in collecting the data, clean data. And therefore, many times I witnessed a lot of players, apologizing for disruption of their services, etc. It has been very difficult. Fortunately, as I told you, the regulator is extremely supportive and therefore intervened and pushed really banks to make the right effort in order to be on top of it and offer really a quality data to fintech industry in Europe. So I would say that at the moment, what we now see also something very interesting, because when we think fintech, we think about startups, we think about the kind of guy, which is very young and in nice offices, very modern, and with the free coffee for everyone. You have now the emergence of fintech style, but entities, but from the incumbent banks. So now you see incumbent banks, offering marketplace in Europe. For example, becoming really at the same time, third-party provider and infrastructure provider. For example, so we said about France, but I know also Switzerland, etc. So for example, you have UBS in Switzerland, who is now offering a marketplace for mortgages, prime mortgages from retail clients. And basically any bank in Switzerland can connect to the marketplace, okay? But UBS will also compete. So UBS provides the infrastructure, but at the same time is competing as a third-party provider. So it's very interesting because now you see the big banks, the big player, starting to reinvent themselves because they basically understand that if they don't do so, if they don't clean their data, change their core banking system, start entering in the competition in marketplaces, etc., they will simply, believe me, in coming years, they will simply disappear if they don't do that. Definitely. So they are really obliged to take this direction and to become either sometimes competitors, but also service provider for the new fintech landscape in Europe. And I had Switzerland because Switzerland had difficulty at the beginning, but now they start really taking pace, especially with the blockchain aspect where they are really ahead of the curve on this one. So I hope that I kind of answer to what we see in Europe and in France in terms of fintech industry, and I will be happy to discuss about it and answer a question later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Franklin. Now I will allow Wael to jump in and to give us an overview of the situation in Morocco. Wael, please.
Thank you.
And
Thank you, Hélène.
Yeah, you're welcome. You can share the screen.
All right, I'll do that. Okay, do you see the screen?
Yes, perfect.
Perfect. Well, it's a really a great pleasure to be with this distinguished panel and to share, to talk about FinTech, which is a very fascinating topic. So I was supposed to talk about Morocco, but when preparing the presentation, I said, okay, since the region, the Maghreb region is the same, so I'll talk about Morocco, and the bonus will be Algeria and Tunisia. Those countries, they share many things from a historical standpoint. They have almost the same level of economic development, and they also have the same aspirations with regards to FinTech. So my presentation will cover the three countries, and you will see that the conclusions are the same for those group of countries. Let me start by, so this presentation is based on my advisory work in FinTech, but also is based also on my experience as a FinTech entrepreneur. So I tried to just to summarize in this very short time period, summarize really the main insight from my perspective. And at the end of the presentation, I'll have some policy recommendation for the region to develop FinTech. First of all, we have to mention, and it has been said in the presentations, that the FinTech development, FinTech is not something very isolated. It's part of the financial markets. So developing FinTech supposes also that it's a development of an ecosystem. So it's about many dimensions. And one of the issues we're facing in our countries, in our region, in the Maghreb region, is that we look at FinTech from a very narrow perspective, and it's like, it's technology, it's IT, and let's do some incentives, and it's going to work, and there is demand. It's not like that. I mean, FinTech, it's kind of more holistic. There are many dimensions. You have ease of doing business because you have to give enough incentives for people to start those companies. You have to work on taxation, to work on time to create businesses, and to manage insolvency if things don't work. We have to work on financial markets, on infrastructure, IT, on HR, on innovation, on reputation of the marketplace. So it's not like a very narrow dimension, but it's rather many dimensions at once, which makes the subjects complicated to implement. In the region, so this is from Google Trends, and I compiled this data myself. So I took the search on FinTech for the three countries, from Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia. So we see clearly that there is an interest in the topic. So almost in 2011, I mean, it's like a very insignificant, but after 2015, I mean, you see that there is an interest in the topic. If we use Google Trend as a proxy, there are many factors that are supportive of FinTech, and in the presentations on Egypt, I mean, we have the same in our region. We have a young population, and this population is really digitally oriented. We have also a very low indicators in financial inclusion as well. On average in the region, financial inclusion is around 30%. So you have almost like 70% of the population excluded from financial services, which is really an important loss for those countries from economic development. Without finance, you can develop, I mean, you can have development, but it's going to be very limited. So financial inclusion is really a huge opportunity for FinTech companies. And finally, and this is one factor, I think that Egypt is in the same situation. We have a large number of people in Maghreb countries living abroad. So there is this remittances coming specifically from Europe, but we have a high cost of remittances. And myself, when I were abroad, I faced this issue where I found it extremely expensive to send money to the country. So those are, for me, many factors that are supposed to support the development of the finance and of the FinTech industry. And to have the Maghreb region normally should be very active in that regard. But in reality, we have a very underdeveloped FinTech markets in all three countries. And this is, I mean, shown in the different rankings. Of course, we can argue about the rankings methodology, but if you're not present in all rankings, it means that you have a problem. So if you look at the IFZ global fintech rankings, the FinTechs and other rankings, digitizing Africa report and so on, most Maghreb countries are not cited. So it means that those countries, in those countries, fintech, faces some issues. Although there is a huge potential. One of the problems, talking about why we have issues in the fintech sector, one of the issues is internet connection. In the region, the internet connection, is kind of, it's not the best globally, and it's not the worst, but it's in the middle of the pack. But to develop a fintech industry, you need to have to be very good from a fintech perspective, because you need to be connected to remote servers. You need to do your transaction remotely. So internet shouldn't be an issue. And in terms of speed, in terms of availability, one of the issues we have in our countries, when I say our countries, I'm talking about the Maghreb countries, we have huge inequalities between urban areas and rural areas. So you have this issue. So if you are in the city, that's fine, everything is working fine. But when you go to the countryside, it's not the same quality in terms of, for instance, for download or for availability and so on. And this is true for mobile, but it is also true for broadband. So that's another issue. Although the quality of internet has been improving, but when we compare to middle income countries with whom we compete, we are under in terms of performance of broadband. And again, this is a very kind of infrastructure part, and this is very important for the development of the fintech industry. One other factors, but maybe we share it with other countries, is what you call the preference for cash. The people, because the people they love cash for many reasons, but that could be seen as an opportunity, but it's seen also sometimes as a constraint. I've just put here two indicators as a proxy of using cash. The first one is we call the informal economy as a percentage of GDP. So it's around 30%, 35%. So Indonesia is around 40%. So it's a large chunk of the economy. Again, it can be seen either from as an opportunity, but it's also as also a constraint, and also from my perspective as a fintech entrepreneur. Also, one of the constraints we face is that people sometimes they don't want to be to deal with the financial sector for many reasons. Sometimes it's taxation. Sometimes it's just cultural norms. Another indicator here is the percentage of the labor force not contributing to social security. So this is the informal jobs and so on. And it's like first in Morocco, it's around like 75% that are not contributing to social security. In Nigeria, 60%, and in Tunisia, around 50%. So those are one of the issues that we face in the fintech industry, is that some people, for cultural reasons and for other reasons, they like cash. One of the barriers to fintech development is the underdevelopment of the capital markets. If you look at the countries that are really well developed in the fintech industry, it happens that those countries have also very strong capital markets. In our countries, it's quite the opposite. We have a strong banking sector. The banking sector represents around more than 90 or 95% of all the finances that go to the economy. So you can develop a fintech industry without a very liquid, very deep capital markets, because you need to raise money, you need to do many things, and also the capital market itself is an area for developments for fintech companies. So the underdevelopment of capital markets in the region is also a barrier to the development of fintech. One last thing is the ecosystem dimensions. Fintech, sometimes in our countries, when we deal with fintech, we see them from a very silo perspective. For instance, okay, crowdfunding is great. Let's have a low crowdfunding, and we do the low crowdfunding. It's not working. So because it's not like that. Fintech is an ecosystem. You have, as mentioned in the previous presentations from the other speakers, we have many dimensions. We have the many issues that we have to fix. We have the issues of open banking. We have the issues of the cyber security, data protections, digital ID, and so on and so on. So the FinTech is one ecosystem, and the development of FinTech to happen has to rest on different layers. And so that's very important. It seems to me, this is from my experience, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to me that we don't have a really holistic vision and strategy about FinTech. When it comes to regulations, we have some regulations here and there about FinTech. We have regulations on crowdfunding, we have regulations on e-wallets in some countries, but many areas are not covered. For instance, for biometrics, open banking, distributed ledger technologies, crypto assets, we don't have any regulation whatsoever on this. So one of the issues is also that the regulatory environment does not cover all dimensions of FinTech. Sometimes it's an issue because if you'd like to, for a FinTech entrepreneur, I mean, you need a regulatory environment. And I was really glad to learn about the experience of Egypt in the Sandbox part. That's very important because the regulatory environment cannot keep pace with the development of technology and FinTech. In our region, when we talk about FinTech, so it's mostly payments companies. So I think it's more than 90%, 95% is around payments companies. So digital wallets. So what they offer is payments accounts. They offer also money transfer, cash deposits and withdrawal. They give you cards, e-wallets, and so on, apps, and they also offer currency exchange. So that's the main sector of FinTech in the region, and it's mostly due to the low levels of financial inclusion. So it's a good contribution to improving financial inclusion in the region. COVID was a positive thing for FinTech because, for instance, our central bank in Morocco allowed to onboard retail and corporate clients remotely through digital authentication tools. So that wasn't the case before. I mean, to open a bank account, you needed to go. I mean, you can start the procedure online, but at a certain time you need to go to the bank to sign and to show off. So that's important. So COVID, I mean, we had this constraint. We had in Algeria, the Minister of Finance authorized and amended finance law to include crowdfunding, and in Morocco also they moved faster in the electronic signature certificates, and the prices were reduced because that was one of the issues. The electronic certificates was very expensive. I mean, and then it was not good for the business models. Tunisia has also initiated a FinTech. Sandbox. They had this approach, meaning that we have you as a cohort, you apply and then you are supported by the central bank, and at the end we can decide, depending on the results, what to do in terms of regulatory and licensing environment. So, but I think they started last year in 2020, and the numbers are promising, but they haven't finished the first cohort. So we need to wait a little bit in order to see what are the results from this Tunisian sandbox. In Tunisia also they have one important part, which is sometimes we forgot it for the FinTech. FinTechs are also in most cases, not all cases, of course, we have FinTech and Big Tech, but in FinTech most cases are like startup companies. So we can develop FinTech without the development of the startup environment. So in Tunisia, they have this wonderful initiative. I mean, they call it the Startups Act Benefits Package, when they give incentives to startups entrepreneurs in FinTech and other areas, and support in like reduced taxation and so on. So that's very important because FinTech is also part of the entrepreneurial ecosystem. I would like to close with some, from my perspective, very important policy recommendations. The first one is that we need to complete the legal and the regulatory environment, regulatory framework in Maghreb countries when it comes to FinTech, before engaging in more complex and elaborate policies. Some countries, as Tunisia, started with the sandbox, which is fine, but I think one of the prerequisites is to have the basic regulatory framework in place. The second aspect is the Sandbox. I think it's a good initiative, and it allows the central bank to learn, but also it gives an opportunity for startups to start working and experiencing for innovations. The third point is regarding innovation labs, and our sister from the central bank mentioned that that's very important also in terms of support mechanism for fintech. The fourth aspect is capacity and skill building, both for the regulators and for other stakeholders, because sometimes we face issues with the regulators themselves, because not everyone is maybe aware of the fintech issues and opportunities and so on. So having this capacity and skill building for the regulators and for the financial environment is extremely important. Why? Because the technology evolves quickly, so we need to have this continuous training programs. Also from the customer side, the financial and technical literacy is very important. I mean, if you'd like to provide a fintech solution to people, they need really to understand what fintech is about, so that having those programs of literacy, financial literacy programs, initiatives are also important. And finally, for the open banking policies, and that's also an issue in our countries, because we can't have access to banks' data. It's really complicated. So having policies that allow banks to share data with third parties and at the same time to protect them is very important, and are one of the policy recommendations that should be implemented in Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia if you would like to meet the market potential. And with that, I hand the presentation over to Hélène again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wael, for that. So now let's open the floor to our participants. I have several questions. Maybe one for Eslam. There is a question from Ahmed, who is asking, from panelist experience, how blockchain technology does contribute to fintech enablement? Maybe Eslam, would you like in 1 or 2 minutes? And sure. Maybe Rasha then? Yes.
Very good question. So fintech is blockchain is a very broad definition. What's most common to people is the cryptocurrency version of what blockchain does. However, blockchain has multiple applications that support the financial services industry as well as multiple other industries. Some of them include some things like smart contracts, which enable us to do business, in a much more efficient and secure way across multiple sectors. It has many applications in the agriculture sector recently, in financial services, in healthcare and insurance, so on and so forth. Right? Blockchain is when it comes to financial services, and I'll talk about digital currency here for a second. We have many shapes and forms, and if we take one of my favorites, I'm not saying that so you can buy it, just to be clear, is XRP or Ripple. Now, this is the currency that is being traded today. However, the real application of it is allowing global real-time settlement of money transfer. And I think that's such a powerful tool that's enabled by blockchain that will become mainstream over the near future. The fact that it has digital currency, that it has become a trade-doing digital currency, is a very separate thing. So we are seeing platforms like XRP. We're seeing, in fact, platforms like Ethereum that is becoming like the future developer platform for blockchain solutions, like iOS is or Android. Ethereum plays that role. So it's really important to go deeper when it comes to blockchain from that perspective. Blockchain will continue to evolve globally, and it will have a role in the currency to play. My 2 cents here, and this is just a very personal perspective on it, is as we drive electronic payments and as we drive the penetration of electronic payments globally and here in the region, I think we will see not necessarily the replacement of fiat currency. We will see potentially a digital version of a euro, a US dollar, etc. Before we see the replacement of them buy a Bitcoin or an XRP, etc. So we have a period of transition. Unless some global economic collapse happens, we will just see people trading in just cash and paper disappearing from the system and being replaced with a digital form that is governed and controlled within a blockchain framework. That's kind of my 2 thoughts on blockchain. Happy to pass on to others.
Thank you very much, Eslam. Franklin, I was looking at you anyway. Maybe you want to jump in, please?
Yes, I mean, the blockchain is really of added value, and I can see it also many fintech initiatives in financial markets. We had in the 80s the securitization of assets, and now what we see is the tokenization of assets. So I see many infrastructure providers and many fintech also startups working on tokenization of financial assets. So this is really extremely important, and I guess that I would say between 3 to 5 years we will see really emerging a new infrastructure in financial market regarding tokenized assets.
Thank you, Franklin. Rasha or Wael, before I switch to another question?
I think Eslam and Franklin covered it very well, and it's not about the blockchain, it's about the use case and the value-added services coming out of the blockchain. So if it's making it cheaper or faster for the consumer, then the blockchain is going to help conserve. Otherwise, it's a technology that is not going to add value unless you know exactly what you want to do with it in terms of the use case.
Okay, thank you, Rasha. I will now select another question. This was about the risks. What about the fintech risks for the global financial system stability? So I do not know who would like to. Eslam, I see that maybe.
Yeah, sure. Again, I think I've kind of indirectly answered that question. I think fintech is an enabler for the global financial services sector, not necessarily a threat. I think if we agree that the future is about collaboration between incumbents and fintechs, and it's ultimately about growing the entire pie, allowing financial services to be delivered to new customer segments and to manage money flows that these players never really had access to prior to the fintech revolution, if you like. I think it's a real win-win across the board. It's not a threat at all in my opinion.
Thank you, Eslam. Wael, something to add?
No, I agree with Eslam. I mean everything can be seen from a risk and opportunity.
Yes.
And there are risks for fintech, but my point of view is that the opportunities they all outweigh the risk. Now, the main issue I see for fintech is that fintech is, by definition, based on scale and based also on global solutions. And historically, the regulations have been national regulations. So there is an important here aspect is how to strengthen the international cooperation with regards to regulations for fintech, specifically for big fintech companies that have operations across many countries. So that's very important. But all in all, the opportunities for fintech, specifically for our countries, fintech is really a door opener for many entrepreneurs and for the population in general.
Thank you. I have now a question.
Maybe if I can just say something, because I see that you see the opportunities of the fintech industry, and we can. You said basically growing the pie, and definitely due to the possibilities of financial inclusion, thanks to fintech, obviously we can really grow the pie in MENA. Basically, in Europe it's a slightly different story, because in Europe you have incumbent banks, as I told you, with very old core systems and very costly infrastructure, in fact. And when they see emerging fintech partners, fintech competitors, proposing service which are tenths of the price offered by the incumbent banks, then it can be extremely difficult. Nevertheless, I still agree to the fact that the incumbent banks, they need to partner. They definitely need to partner with the fintech industry, first to reinvent themselves and to take maybe the opportunity, you know, to reshape all their old infrastructure, and second, basically to cope with the pace of innovation and product offering, etc.
Eslam, I thought you wanted to add
No,
something.
I'm totally agreeing with what's been said. At the end of the day, I think the regulator has a big role to play. We're fortunate to have a very open-minded regulator now here in Egypt. I'm not saying this because they're wrong.
There are definitely risks. Of course, the opportunity there that we really wanted to grow, but three things we could not breach: cybersecurity, consumer protection, and data protection. So basically, we're trying to mitigate the risk. Like we're saying, we're balancing between the risk and innovation at the same time. But those are the three things that we actually have to look at, so we can actually grow the fintech ecosystem in a very secure manner.
Rasha, if you allow me, are you looking to what is being done through PSD2 in Europe? Because what I know from the regulation is basically that it's not an obligation to be incorporating in the Eurozone in order basically to be able to get the data, as long as you have the same language for APIs or you comply with GDPR requirements regarding data protection and everything around cyber security. It's definitely possible to be a third-party provider or aggregator, whatever, payment initiator outside the EU. Are you basically working
yes.
to close the gap?
We're based on the new law of the open banking regulation. We're currently working on the open banking regulation, and even the data sharing on other behavioral scoring, on other data sharing based on behavioral scoring. We don't want to put it just on the banks. But yes, as per the new law, we've put the open banking. We're now working on the executive regulations to be issued very soon, and we're looking into this. And of course, we know about the PSD2 and the data protection system.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think out of time, this is time for us now to close the Q&A. I'm really sorry for the questions that I couldn't address. I can still organize another webinar. So thank you very much to the speakers, and thanks to the ESLSCA colleagues, Françoise, Jean-Pierre in France, and Mariam in Morocco. And I do not forget Dalia, Ahmed, and Nadine here in Egypt. The recording of the conference session will be made available on each ESLSCA website shortly. Thank you all, and looking forward to seeing you for the second cross-border workshop in a few weeks. Bye. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Have a great one.
You too. Good afternoon. Good evening.